Well, when you think about how I defined justice for everyone, reading that quote that we would show all people due regard and proper treatment, and just that idea of justice. What does the white church not understand about that?
I think about it in terms of how we can leverage our bodies. If bodies are being subjected to harm and violence, if your arm is in need because you slammed it in the car door, you don't say, well, get over it, arm.
Yeah.
I got good feet. I got another one that's good over here too.
Right.
You just need to get over it. Get over yourself. Get over yourself. I think about it in terms of how certain conversation killers, one of them I mentioned earlier is the idea of whiteness or white privilege can be, I'm not using it weaponized. Please, it's not a weaponized term. It is a social fact. And studies have kind of abstracted that out. But the reality is the conversation can continue on. And for believers, it needs to be illustrative by Jesus' own ministry. You've heard the parabolic material being used as a way to describe what's going on. You've got the sheep and the shepherd. You've got the one sheep that strays, and you've got the 99 that stay. It's as if by Jesus focusing upon the one, the 99 cry out, well, our lives matter too. Don't you care about us as sheep? Of course. But you're not the one in harm's way right now. You're not the one in grave danger.
Yeah.
You're not the one who's in grave danger right now. And so, in essence, that's the best illustration that I've heard in a long time to say that Jesus goes after that one because that one, which is part of the broad, which is part of all the lives of the sheep, is in grave danger, and he needs to focus his attention there. And I think that that's what the white church needs to know. We're not saying you don't matter, but it is that there is a problem in the body, and one part of the body needs a tourniquet.
Yes.
One question I was going to ask is what passage you would point to for the white church during this time. And you mentioned, Ernest, the one lost sheep, and I've heard that this week as well. I think it's so powerful. Are there any other passages that come to mind that you would direct us to think about and just meditate on, either one of you?
I'll share one real quick. I got my Bible open. It's James 3:17. Wisdom that comes from above is first peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, good fruit, impartial and sincere, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. So James 3:17-18. I've been thinking on that a little bit. Yeah.
Why does that come to mind? Like, why is that important for the white church to hear?
Well, I think that because we're fractured, because we don't know what to do, solidarity is everything. And to be a peacemaker is to, in my thinking, inaugurate a bit of shalom, the peace of God, God's peace, into a moment. This is the church can really begin to hopefully infiltrate these spaces to help us think a little bit more cogently about how we can partner and love and care for one another. And I think that Jesus' own ministry, when he talks about peace, I leave with you, and at the end of John 16, not as the world gives, but my peace. I think that that's something we need to be mindful of and trying to pursue.
Bobby, I would like to share two places that have come to my mind through the current racial pandemic being on display again. One comes from 1 John 3, verse 17. In the ESV, it says, "But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him?" Now, here's where we need to do some self-examination and reality checks concerning the distribution of goods and wealth and economic disparities inside the country, from which white evangelical middle class and upper middle class churches benefit, and unfortunately other churches do not gain benefit. from that. And this would be a long discussion. But if we look at how wealth moves with communities and people who live in those communities, and how people with wealth tend to congregate around one another, and with the history of the country, even with a dividing line like 290, how those with wealth get separated from many who do not have wealth. And we watch how that affects something like access to health care now,
Yeah.
or even having insurance so that you can go access the health care, or what that means for seeing justice come to certain communities, or people having the ability to go to better schools and have better access to jobs so that they won't have to stay in an economic depression, or even be perceived as those who are not meaningfully contributing to society. Those with the world's goods, seeing those in need as believers, cannot close their hearts now.
Yeah.
And they have to say, okay, what does it mean for me now to have practical open-heartedness and orthopraxy toward those in that situation? When I'm a person of means and goods, it doesn't mean everyone has the same level of means and goods, and everybody has the same level of leisurely income or discretionary income, or the amount of wealth massed here. But it does mean we need to think about that, and how we could be involved and have contribution without paternalism, without control. So that I've just been thinking about that a little more. But the other place that has struck me in the last few days goes back to the whole conversation about whether or not the gospel is associated with social justice, or social justice has anything to do with the gospel. And I could go into a lot of angry feelings over those discussions. But I've been teaching, I taught through the Gospel of Mark last semester, one of my New Testament elective courses. And all four gospels have a similarity in a certain part of the structure, beginning with the announcement of the forerunner coming, John the Baptist.
Yeah.
And he's the herald who is trying to get people to be prepared to meet the Lord before the Lord comes and starts crushing the mountains and straightening out the valleys and the crooked places. If you're going to be prepared to meet the Lord, so John is preaching the gospel message here.
He definitely is.
And he calls people to repentance. Here's what the gospel message looks like to tax collectors and soldiers. Don't extort. Don't take more than you have to. That is a message of economic justice attached to the repentance of the gospel. And so the gospel certainly has to do with a social economic issue in the lives of many who are living in Roman culture. And here we are saying the gospel has nothing to do with
that.
And that's the first message of the forerunner.
Everything to do with it.
God. And
we can't sort lentils on that. We cannot.
Yeah.
We can't be sorting in lentils. We can't be picking apart, choosing which ones we agree with and others. That we got to take the whole thing.
Yes.
To which you're absolutely right. I learned something. Thank you, brother. Preach.